The narcissist is the guy who's going to walk into the bar and take the hot girl home. He wins.
Welcome to the Team Local Fit Roundtable. I'm your host, Laurin Conlon. Each week, we share the evidence-based practices and communication-driven strategies we use with our clients to give you the tools that you need to be successful for life. This week, I'm joined again by Rick, our team mental health counselor, and this is part 2 of our series on narcissism. Part 1 was just a general overview about the disorder and some of the characteristics, how to identify it, etc. And then this is going to be about dating a narcissist, which is fortunately very common. And like you said in the first podcast, typically the way that you guys are finding out about people who have narcissistic personality is because of people who are coming in to therapy, not because the narcissist themselves is coming in. It's because of the other people that are affected. And I know I've personally worked with clients and just known friends who have been in significant relationships with these types of people, and it is a real fucking nightmare. So it starts off kind of light and there's maybe a few red flags, but then it's like full-blown terror after that. So excited to get into this.
Yeah. So dating or being in a relationship with somebody who's narcissistic can oftentimes lead to a very toxic, unhealthy relationship that you have not only with that person but with yourself and all of your other relationships and aspects of your life. It seems to be the one that drives most people to therapy is the intimate relationship that they have. It's the boyfriend, the girlfriend that's narcissistic, and the person's left kind of, as I said at the end of the podcast, like there's this grieving process, and what they're going through is this kind of narcissistic abuse. And so it's very similar to a person who's recovering from an abusive relationship where there's just intense levels of doubt, insecurity, shame, and they're just trying to find a footing again, trying to dissect what went wrong. And oftentimes, the hardest lesson to learn with this is that it's not about you. It's 100% about them. And what do I mean by that? Well, for narcissists, they don't love you. They love the idea of you. And it's not just the idea of you. It's what you mean to them in terms of how the rest of the world perceives you or perceives them. For example, this is like a classic kind of trophy wife scenario. It's, you're pretty, but because you're pretty, it makes me look better for the rest of the world. It's not about what you are sharing with me and what our experiences are. I'm basically using you, and you don't mean anything to me, really. It's just kind of like, it tends to be like narcissistic relationships are very superficial, they lack depth, and they're very instrumental. And what I mean by that is it's a relationship of convenience. That, for example, like this glass of water, it like has value to me right now, but the second I'm finished with that glass of water, I put it in the sink and walk away from it, and I never think about it again.
You don't put it in the dishwasher?
The dishwasher, sorry. The idea behind that becomes, number one, I understand how obsessive compulsive Laurin is. It's a separate podcast.
I hate when people leave me in the sink.
Anyway, moving on from your neurotic behaviors.
Okay.
You see the value that somebody they can be very dismissive with it. And so when I tell somebody that narcissists lack empathy for people, they don't understand it or appreciate it until it's like, oh my God, I'm nothing more than a water bottle that gets thrown out, or a piece of tissue. Like that tissue is relevant when I need it. When I don't, I crumble it up and I throw it out. It has no value to me. That's the instrumental piece to this. And so I want people to understand that, because while it's incredibly painful to make that realization that you don't really mean much to that person, it's necessary for your healing to begin to understand the depth of what this disorder does, how it breeds, how it lives, because you just exist to benefit that person, not for that person to benefit you. It's not a real relationship in that context.
Yeah, and that's hard even in I guess the word friendship here is a loose term, but there's it feels very opportunistic, like what you're describing, and I think everybody can know a person like that, and that just feels super shitty. You're like, I'm this person to them when no one else is around, or when they need me, but then when they don't, or somebody else better comes along, and it's like you don't exist, and like that feels really shitty, and like just like a friend situation.
Absolutely.
Like I can't even imagine how awful that would feel in a relationship. Like that would just be like 100 times magnitude.
It's even worse because
so
you care about them on a deeper level, or a different level, but for sure. And you know, in many ways, narcissists can sometimes convince you that they are loving you because they're paying for your bills. They're covering rent. They're paying for a dress, a nice vacation, a nice watch. Like they can convince you that they're loving you. And in many ways, in our society, in our culture, you know, sometimes those things can pass for love. And I'm certainly not putting it down. Like, if you have the means to provide those things, do it. And it can make a person feel wonderful and welcome. You know, there's nothing wrong with taking somebody out to dinner. There's nothing wrong with spending money on people from time to time. But when it's the only thing that's of a sense of value to them, you begin to realize how instrumental the relationship is to them in terms of how it just benefits them and what you're actually giving them. And so this is also where controlling behaviors start to come in. When the bloom is off the rose, you know, this is when we start to see much more toxic and abusive qualities start to enter the relationship.
You said the balloon. I'm like, what? Balloon on the rose?
Is it me? Are you not hearing me, or
I think
am I
it's me.
mumbling?
I think it's me, but we'll just
Comment
go.
below.
We'll just go.
Is it Lauren or Rick?
It's definitely me.
So I want to get into this first. How to spot the narcissist, how the narcissist works, how you meet the narcissist. And this is some stuff that I think a lot of people will know or be able to like kind of reflect on their own dating life and see this stuff start to play out. And remember when I told you in the last one that narcissism is a cover, develops based off of deeper rooted insecurities. And so what we begin to see is it's a facade, okay? They don't know that they're insecure. They think that they're great. So let's take a look at like dating. And for most people, dating means interacting in a social environment. This is where typically most people find. Now today's a little bit different because there's online dating, but in the past it was always going into a bar, you know, or some sort of party or social setting where they would meet people. And our society, our culture is kind of trained to identify people who look good, who are physically pleasing. So narcissists are oftentimes very vain. They take good care of their appearance. They look great. These can be the guys that are constantly working out. Their bodies are in excellent shape. You know, they're always wearing shirts that show off their arms, or they might put extra effort into looking good for whatever the situation is, like
buying expensive clothes,
the Armani suits. Like they look great. They kind of stand out because of their physical appearance, not just their physical face or body, but because of like how they present themselves. So they can oftentimes be well groomed, especially to the atmosphere that they're in. Narcissist people are really good at making eye contact, but here's the catch: they do it in a way that doesn't necessarily seem creepy.
Yeah,
but it
fine line.
It can be more arrogant. Yeah, right. Like there's
eye
like
contact is...
I can make eye contact, but make you feel really uncomfortable.
Especially at a bar. Oh my God. You're like, hey.
While they're doing it in a non-creepy way, they're also doing it in ways that are slightly more arrogant than most people. Like this is the guy who might send a drink over to you, like kind of unsolicited. They're really good at, you know, connecting with you. They're good at cracking jokes. They're louder than everyone in the room, not necessarily in terms of vocal volume, but just their presence. And they can draw attention to themselves in ways where people just kind of notice them. And this is very intoxicating for a lot of people. And for a lot of women, they're always taught to play hard to get, you know. And this is where the hard to get game is like fucking candy to a narcissist. It feeds into the pathology and they love it. And so you think you have the upper hand in this, and you don't. Initially you might, because you're getting their attention, and that's great. But they're going to work to capture your attention, and they're going to work to keep your attention until they know that they have your full attention. And then it's usually within a very short period of time. And when I say short, I mean most of this can start to be seen within 1 to 2 months, where the relationship starts to have these dramatic shifts, and we start to see very different personality characteristics start to come out. But the narcissists love the game. They are invested in it. It is dopamine to them, and it just triggers them to play off of every instinct they have as to what makes them great. But they can be very seductive. They can be great in conversations. They'll share stories with you about where they visited, where they went to school, where they vacationed, and it's this larger than life kind of persona. But it's also very subtle. And if you're not paying attention to it, you get caught up in it. And it's kind of like, they'll drop things like, they'll say, oh yeah, I used to have, there was this really great sandwich shop, right outside my school at Stanford. And it's kind of like, oh, they just dropped the Ivy League education there. You know what I mean? Was that necessary? Couldn't you have just said what city it was in? Or, oh yeah, well, a few of my friends and I used to always love to go out, and grab a few drinks after a long night of studying at Harvard. And you're like, oh, okay. So you start to see why is Harvard relevant in this? Unless you want me to know that you're this man of stature and importance. You'll hear things like, oh yeah, I love visiting certain places. Like when my parents had the house in Hawaii, you're like, oh, or I'm going to take my helicopter to wherever, and it's kind of like, okay, these are the subtle signs of narcissism. And I'm sure you as a woman have seen and experienced this on a wide variety of...
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And some of this, what you're saying isn't, again, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. Not all of this is bad. If you work out, you take care of yourself, you hop in expensive clothes, doesn't mean you're a narcissist.
No,
right?
There's nothing wrong with
just
because
what you were describing with the personality before you got to that part, but the inviting, charming, loud, talkative, that's super, you're very extroverted, you know what I mean? And I know a lot of people who are like that who are great people, right?
Mm-hmm.
They just capture the room. Mm-hmm. They always have a story, they can always do, but they're not necessarily have these negative traits. So
right.
it's this really fine line of what they're presenting,
mm-hmm.
And that's what makes it really difficult, I think, for people to distinguish, because it's okay, do you just have a great personality and you're really extroverted, or are you the serial killer? Right? I mean, could be, could go either way. Let's see what happens. But it's definitely, I just love how it's so nuanced. But yes, I would say that there's a lot of people who fit this category.
Mm-hmm.
And that does attract you to those people, whether it's in a sexual way or not. If somebody's in the corner, sulking, I'm not necessarily oh, let me go talk to that person. They seem really interested in being here.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to talk to the person who is outgoing, who has something that is maybe more striking, who is going to be easy to talk to. Why would you not? So I think that it just kind of feeds into itself.
It does.
And that's why they're always rewarded. They don't have these there's not a lot of negative...
Correct.
There's not a lot of negative implications to what they're doing.
The narcissist is the guy who's going to walk into the bar and take the hot girl home. He wins in his mind. He's this is... And the sad commentary of it all, the tragedy of it, is the guy in the corner who's weak or presenting as not as confident. It's the guy who's probably going to treat you better, who's going to pay attention and be more authentic. Because what you're falling for is the gimmick. You're falling for the facade, the superficial nature of it. There's nothing behind that. And so oftentimes, I guess the pattern becomes are you healing from this, or are you going to repeat the pattern with the next narcissist? And so what you'll find is people get from one empty relationship to the next, and that's because from a narcissistic perspective, because they're so insecure, they're generally empty. And because of their own emptiness, you will never be enough for them. And that is a common theme for everybody who is no longer in these relationships or in them and being there's nothing I can do to make this person love me back. And it's kind of well, they're empty. How do you expect to fill that if they can't feel complete themselves?
It's oh my God, what's that movie I'm thinking with Steve Carell and Ryan Gosling? It's so funny.
Oh,
you know what I'm talking about.
Crazy Stupid Love.
Yeah. That's literally this. If you guys haven't seen that, here's another movie reference. All right, I'm not gonna fuck this one up. I've seen it a million times. It's really good. But he, Ryan Gosling, is the narcissist, or starts out, I guess you would call him in the... Is that what we would characterize it as, I guess? He's always...
Yes and no, because there's an empathy that he has for for Steve Carell's character.
Yeah, I mean, at some point.
But he is the charming,
Yeah, what he's presenting.
Yes.
And
the well-groomed, money, attractive, slick kind of personality where he's like, yeah, I'm going to walk up to a table full of women, and you have to have a certain amount of moxie to do that. Like if you're going to walk up to 4 or 5 women sitting at a table and talk to one of them and hit on them in front of their friends, like, yeah, you're playing at a slightly different level. Most people need a slightly more isolated one-on-one kind of experience, which is also where I will start instructing some women to say, like, okay, stop meeting men in bars because you're falling for the facade. Like, this is the playground of it all.
Online is, I would imagine, is
online
so much
is just
worse.
as easy to deceive people. In fact, easier, because so much of the communication is done through text. You can't read tone or context of it.
And right? You can literally catfish people. I mean, you could literally use other people's photos, like down to like this isn't even you, which is horrifying. Like imagine, I can never imagine like talking to somebody and then you show up and it doesn't even look like that.
Oh no.
Oh my god.
It'd be awful.
It'd be so awful. But not even just that, but like imagine the things that you can say or you can present online. Like we talked about in the last one, there is like a whole sector of people who do this, like just do things just for praise or just for the attention. And like online dating, I feel like would be so much worse because then it's like you can craft what you want to say to somebody.
Rather than being at least having to be in the moment.
Yeah, and then it's like, you know, oh, we could talk all the time, and then it's like you see somebody face to face, and you're like, I don't really know what to say, or like what is context, like social cues, you know, and it's like, so I don't know, maybe bars isn't the right place, but maybe the gym is better because honestly, maybe not. Okay, I'm a meathead, so I'm inclined. I would say that there's certain positive things about any type of, not necessarily just a commercial gym, right? Maybe that's, maybe not. Maybe
like, can you meet people in the gym? Of course, Lauren. Can you meet people online? Yeah.
Yeah.
Should you specifically avoid those areas? I would tell you to find ways before you find yourself invested into a relationship to better qualify the relationship before you allow yourself to become too emotionally invested. Because with these guys, they are smooth. There's a slickness, there's a fantasy or a fairy tale quality about them that people fall for immediately, which is why they're able to pick people up at a bar and take them home that night. Like, that's not necessarily an admirable quality, right? And it also says, like, if you're that person who's doing that, and I'm not talking about like youthful indiscretions, but I'm saying, like, if you find yourself being swept into this pattern over and over again, like, they're using you for sex, they're using you for the outward appearance of you, not the value of you, and not what you bring to a relationship, the mutuality of it all. There's a difference between, and this is so important in dealing with this type of personality and understanding relationships in general, and I want everybody to pay attention to this, and I want you to understand there's a difference between how a person makes you feel versus how a person is treating you, right? And you need to pay attention to not what they look like, but how the person actually makes you feel in the relationship. And if you're feeling insecure, if you're feeling unsure, if you're feeling inadequate, if you're feeling anxiety and hopelessness and helplessness, like, that's not a good relationship for you. It is an unhealthy relationship. And you're in a very dangerous place. I don't know what to tell you, because if those are the feelings that your relationship presents, like, it's not going to get better. It very rarely gets better, because the person has to admit that something else is wrong. And if they don't see anything as wrong, first of all, and let alone if it is wrong, it's your fault. Like, you're in a bad spot. So, like, we can get to how to deal with that. But the reality of it is people pay too much attention to the slickness of it all and the fairy tale, and what they take what the person is saying and they make it in their minds to be what they want rather than who the person is. And the person creates a facade of themselves. They're not walking up and being like, oh yeah, I'm totally insecure, I'm vain, I only want to have sex with you, and you know, you're really pretty, and I don't really give a shit about where you went to school or what you do, but you're gonna look great on my arm at the next lawyer's banquet, so would you mind coming with me? Like, no one's that up front, because if they were, you would be like, no, you're a creep, get out of my face. Or maybe not. Maybe you. Yeah, I was like, maybe you want it. I don't know. I was like, well, in which case, you wouldn't be calling me, I guess.
But I still, okay. Then where are we going to meet people?
That's a good question.
I still stand by my gym comment, because I'm not just saying just a commercial gym, like not like the asshole at the gym. I'm talking any type of gym, whether it's a regular gym, a physical, like being physical and like being drawn to working hard towards certain things, I think are like good qualities.
Sure, absolutely.
So I don't necessarily, I think that it certainly could draw people who are maybe narcissistic, but not necessarily, you know what I mean? And I'm not just talking about like bodybuilders flexing in the mirror. Like that's what everybody thinks about it as a gym.
I'm
And
talking
it's
about
like,
people who might be more prone to drawing that type of person. Like, can you meet people in bars? Sure, everybody does. Can you meet people in the gym, online? Absolutely. Like we both have friends that have met significant others in those places and it's worked out and it's totally fine. And I'm not saying don't. What I am saying is be honest with yourself. If you're prone to attaching to people who are very unhealthy, there's going to be, you've got to change the way you start to seek out people. And it's a lot like, you know, people will be like, well, that's just not fair. Well, good. I'm glad that we've got that out in the open because it's not fair. Guess what? It
Life's
sucks.
not fair.
It ain't fair, you know? It's a lot like a person who is in a wheelchair, right? As much as they want to stand up and run, they can't. So they have to learn to live their life through different means. It's the alcoholic who never gets to have a drink again, right? They have to learn to adjust their life. Is it fair that everybody else can drink around them and have fun and not take it to such extremes? It's not fair, but fuck fair. Where did fairness come from? That's like this thing your parents taught you when you were a kid that doesn't have any benefit in the real world because it's not a real thing. So let's start to discard that. And so if you attract losers and guys that abuse you and use you and take you for granted, stop focusing on people that make you look good and focus on people that make you feel good. That's the fundamental principle of it, how they make you feel. It's not about how they look or how they make you look. How do they actually make you feel? Do they make you feel special? Are they loving and caring and compassionate? Because if you're a normal functioning person, that's what you need to survive. And what you will also notice about physical looks and attraction is this. You could date the most beautiful person in the world. I don't care who they are. On a long enough timeline, that person's going to look average to you. You're going to get used to seeing them naked. You're going to see all their outfits. Like, you know in your mind they're attractive and they're beautiful. But the reality of it is it's not the physical appeal that keeps you in the relationship. It's the quality of the person. It's the life and ability to share things with them. And that's all related to how the person makes you feel and how you make them feel and the mutuality of it all and the give and take and the reciprocity. In narcissistic relationships, it's totally one-sided. And they're using you. And you, to a certain extent, allow yourself to be used because this is fulfilling some need on a level. Some of us can find ourselves there inadvertently, but then stay in it for even when we know it's unhealthy because of a variety of other reasons. Does that make sense? Okay.
I was just challenging you.
That's okay.
Your position.
Challenge.
Like usual.
Challenge. All right. So, start to look for flags in the very first conversations that you have. And they will present themselves. Things like, you know, dropping the Harvard or the Ivy League education or the amount of money that they make or where they live and like these kind of superficial qualities. Like, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like if you're having a group of people having a conversation about the most interesting places they've vacationed, like that stuff might start to come up. So it's not necessarily an indicator, but if you're having a one-on-one conversation,
like unprompted.
Yeah, it's kind of like the name dropper. They're like, oh yeah, when I was hanging out with, you know, Brad Pitt and, you know, and you're like, huh? Like it just doesn't, it's not relevant to the topic.
Unless you really like Brad Pitt, then you're excited.
Yeah. Unless you're talking about him in a new movie or something.
Yeah.
If it feels too good to be true, it generally or usually is. And these things will start to unfold, like I said, somewhere between the 1 to 2 month mark. You'll start to see these things. And so when we focus on the external qualities, women, I'm specifically speaking to you because, again, most narcissistic relationships are where the man is narcissistic. It can be where the woman is, but most of the time it's women who are falling for narcissistic men. When we focus on the external things like money, gifts, cars, clothes, looks, we get caught up in the grandiose plans, like the vacations, the specialized attention, the school, the history, all that kind of stuff. We lose focus on the empathy. We lose focus on their compassion and the, like I said, the reciprocity and the mutualness of the relationships. And sometimes they're so good at giving you their story that you don't recognize they're not asking you about yours. And when the whole basis of the relationship is like, they know so much about me or I know so much about them, but there never seems to be this inquiry into my life. Now, don't get me wrong. These are highly manipulative people. They might ask a bunch of super, deep in questions to try and get to know you, but are they remembering it? Are they paying attention to it? Is there a depth with it? And so what you begin to see is the natural progression in most healthy relationships is like this 2 to 6 month mark, where we begin to see that the relationship starts to become, for lack of a better term, more regular, more average, more typical. And what I mean by that is I start to see you without your makeup more often. We start to eat in more and cook rather than always going out to extravagant places. There's work stress that I actually begin to share with you. Like the farting occurs. Like this is the fart milestone happens. And that's the first time like, oh, we're in a relationship when the person passes gas in front of you. Like it's just gonna happen. It happens to all of us and we all know about it. But in a healthy relationships, when those things start to happen, they actually make you feel comfortable. You feel connected to the relationship and it still feels good and it feels nice. What you see in the narcissistic relationship is that they become bored. They become contemptuous around that 1 to 2 month mark. And this is where you start to see the shift from like this Prince Charming, amazing man who rode in on a white horse and has all these wonderful things to the reality of who he really is. And when that boredom and that contempt start to creep in, they also start to become more controlling. And this is where controlling nature becomes dangerous, is some women will mistake a controlling man for a loving man. And this is where they're like, oh my God, he texts me 28 times a day and he shows up for lunch and he's here for this and he's like keeping tabs on me.
Always there.
And so it's kind of like, that's not normal. And I'm telling you that because you need to hear that. It isn't normal. Is it absolutely normal for a person to pay attention to you? Yes, when you like somebody, of course. But that level of intensity, it's not normal. And as the contempt grows, the controlling features begin to escalate. There's just a general disinterest in who you are. There's a dismissiveness. Why are we talking about you? Like you don't actually really matter. Your problems are just kind of irrelevant. And so it's that dismissive posture that comes with it. And you see this shift, which is very early in the relationship because these aren't deep people. And especially if the relationship is quick to have sex, like within a couple of dates or the first night or whatever it is, like you might meet somebody, exchange a number, right? You text throughout the week, you have your first date, you go back, you guys end up having sex. Like even if you both really enjoy each other in that moment, the narcissist is going to quickly lose interest. And it's usually pretty relevant within that first 1 to 2 months. And so I encourage people, like, delay it. If you don't know this person and you met them and they seem so good, too good to be true, like, I know the urge is to want to dive in, but do yourself a favor and learn from your past mistake and take it a lot slower because they can't keep the facade up forever. They're good at lying, they're good at manipulating, they're good at playing off of other people's emotions. It's what makes them so charming, is they can read people pretty well. But you begin to see how they treat people. You begin to see other things. You begin to understand the quality of their relationships. And these people can be very intoxicating, very addicting, because of the grandeur of their lifestyle or the way that they present. And they're so different and they're so confident. And it's like, is it confidence or is it false arrogance?
And that like dismissive part could make you want, like, it's like a self-correcting thing. Like you want that person more when
seek their approval.
Yeah. Like, oh, what did I do? Mm-hmm. Like, oh, okay, I need to get back in with this. And then that, of course, is why they're doing it, Mm-hmm. These are very smart people.
Yeah. These are CEOs. These are politicians.
Very smart people.
They have the world at their fingertips. One other common trait that's very typical when you're dating a narcissist is they do what's called gaslighting. And we've talked about this. And I think the term in and of itself has taken on multiple meanings in multiple contexts. I want to talk about it within the psychological context, which is basically what gaslighting means to us is that a person is attempting to deny your reality. And what we begin to see is you'll hear phrases like, you have no right to feel that way. Yes, I do. It's my feelings. I can feel how I want to feel. Like, I've listened to Rick and he has said, I'm in control of my feelings and my feelings are mine. Like, you don't get to deny how I'm going to feel or interpret this. Or you don't get to think that. Like, yes, I do. I get to think that. And, or what they'll also do, and this is classic, you'll hear them, you guys will have an argument and they'll say some really horrible, shitty things to you. And then like a few days later, they'll deny they ever said it. They're like, I didn't say that. You're nuts. You're crazy. And so it's like, what happens then? So then the other person starts to do what? They were like, am I crazy?
Yeah.
Right? This is the self-doubt that starts to come through with a person. Doubt themselves within the relationship. The narcissist is fine. They're cuddled in their cocoon of narcissism and defensiveness, and you're over here like totally vulnerable, being like, oh my God, maybe I am crazy. Maybe I did mishear them. Here's a strong indicator. If you feel the need to start recording your conversations, to catch them saying like, holy shit, like I have to catch them saying this. Now, let me preface this. We're all in relationships sometimes where the partner denies saying something. I'm not talking about that within a normal context. I'm talking about it within this, where they're constantly denying your feelings, where they're denying that what you think or feel or actually happen.
Yeah, not like a
happen.
misunderstanding. Like, no,
Right.
I didn't say that.
Right.
You're like, no, you didn't.
You said
like,
the car was blue. I said it was red. Like, no, you didn't. Yes,
Yeah.
I did. I'm going to record you, you know. That's normal relationship banter. That's not, you know, when you feel the need to record or have like voice memos for every conversation that you've had so that you can show the person that you're not crazy, like we've got problems. We've got deeper rooted problems than just bad communication and or not active listening, you know what I mean? So that's pretty,
we're past that.
Yeah, we're past it. And so again, some other things, you know, you're going to see the temper tantrums. You're going to see a lot of disloyalty. You're going to see that they sometimes get pleasure out of the misery of other people. These are very common characteristics of narcissists and what they present like and how they act in relationships. I encourage people to pay attention to how they treat other people. One of my deal breakers is how somebody treats waiters or hostesses and things like that. Because what I want you to understand, you guys, is you think you're special. You're not. What I mean by that is you have that person's attention for that moment. You're sitting in front of them and they're like all about you because of who you are, and they're trying to conquer you and own you and control you. And so you have their undivided attention, but how are they treating the rest of the world? If they're treating the rest of the world like shit, guess what? On a long enough timeline, that's exactly how they're gonna treat you. Don't think you're any different. If you're thinking that right now, listen to me, you're not different. You're not special. They're not gonna just stop treating everybody like shit and treat you like gold and expect that to last forever. It's not gonna happen. They're gonna treat you exactly the way they treat other people. And so I call it kind of the waiter rule. Like I was on a date before when I was in college, and the guy came up and he poured water into our glasses. You know, sometimes the ice will, you know, splash a little bit. She went into the most like degrading, like, who are you? Like, this is disgusting. You're disgusting. Don't ever pour water again. Like, I even think, like, I'm not gonna say it. There was a racial slur thrown in there at some point, and I was like,
don't ever pour water again.
I was like, oh my God. I got up, right? Because I felt horrible for this guy. I got up. I went to the manager of the restaurant. I paid, like, we didn't even order anything yet. I gave him, I was like, here's a 20, please give this to the server. He did nothing wrong. We're leaving. Like, and I was like, get up, let's go, we're going home. And she's like, why? And I'm like, because you're an awful person. And I don't ever want to be around you.
A piece of shit.
Like, how you treat other people is a strong indicator of how that person is going to treat you. And so if that person treats the world with empathy, with care, with compassion, if they care about other human beings, they're going to treat you the same way. So paying attention to those things. You only get to see that when you spend time with them, when you are evaluating the quality of the relationship. And so often we get stuck in these unhealthy patterns. And what women think, and this is the worst part, is they think they're going to be the one to turn them around. You're not. He's not going to turn around. He's not going to change for you. Stop harboring the fantasy that if you love him enough, he will change. He won't. You aren't enough for him because he isn't enough. He is empty. There is an emptiness that is driving his actions. And all the achievements, all the money, all the praise is a superficial notch. It is like 10% at best of their entire tank. That's why they need to keep doing it. That's why the next relationship or the next accomplishment or the validation and the praise that comes with it is so important to them, because there's nothing else that makes them feel whole. They're kind of like a shark. They have to keep swimming. And if they stopped for a minute to actually recognize the damage that they've caused, they would feel horrible about themselves. So they just don't do it. They don't stop swimming. They keep moving forward. You aren't going to love them enough to change them. So, like, if that's you, if you're saying that to yourself, you're living in a state of denial, and it's only going to prolong the relationship and the hurtfulness of it.
Yeah, probably the only way that person would change, the narcissist would change, is if they decide that like they want to make that change, right? Because of all the other things that we've discussed, especially in the last one, like the way that everything is set up and like wired, like it's only if they make, it's kind of like any decision though, right? Like you could tell somebody 100 times like you need to go do this to better yourself, to better your life, but until they decide that they want to do it, it doesn't matter. So the same thing here, like especially somebody who is, you know, in this more pathological kind of situation, it's not like, hey, you know, maybe you need to like lose some weight to like be healthier. This is like a very pathological thing that has like weaved itself into all these areas. But yeah, I definitely think that just like with any change, it has to be coming from that, intrinsically coming from that person who needs to be doing the change. And
I mean, you see it all the time, right? Somebody tells somebody else, hey, you need to get into the gym and lose some weight. Well, if the person doesn't actually want to do that, what does that last, 2-3 weeks? Like if they're at best, you know, the person who's like, I really want to make these significant changes, or I want a body that looks like this, or I want to feel this certain way, like they're committed to it. And you need that commitment and discipline in order to achieve the goals. So yeah, you can want them to change and that's the problem. And this is why I even hesitate even indicating that there is the possibility of some level of change, because that's what we call, in our field, we call that confirmation bias, which basically means like I've laid out of 10 reasons why 9 of the reasons are horrible, awful, and this won't work, but what you're clinging to is the one reason where I said there's a small, slight chance. Well, you could also win the lotto. Good luck. But that's it. People still play the lotto, don't they? All the time. You know, and I always happen to be behind the person buying the scratch-off stickers at the gas station. Can't they have a separate line for that? I swear to God, it's like, oh my God, I just want to get my walker and leave, but you're going to buy. And then when they want to stand there and scratch them off and then get like, oh, I won more tickets. Here, sorry. Totally off topic.
so how do you trick people at the gas station, Rick?
When they're buying scratch-off stickers, horrible. I'm rude. I'm mean. If I could kick them in the back of the knee, I would. Drop their coin. Like,
we all have our things. I'm like, what is my pet peeve? I have a lot of pet peeves. Obviously, I blew up my
Oh, that's...
You know what?
We're podcast.
We're done.
Yeah.
Of my many OCD traits. What bothers me?
All right.
2-hour podcast.
Yeah. So I guess before we wrap up, I want to go into what are your options when you're dealing with a narcissist? And so...
Yeah, because this could get kind of like, I don't want to use this like in a... Like, kind of get scary, right? Like, if somebody is that controlling.
Yes.
You know, we don't know if this is something that could be physical. You know, not just like emotionally. It really could turn into something physical, or they basically try and. What I've seen with people who do this, they try and make the other person look really bad.
Sure.
Even when they haven't done, they create these fake stories and these narratives that are completely false, but they're so good at sharing stuff that people believe them, and then they're like, oh, even if they were really close, they're like, man, like, did that really happen? Like, would that person really do that? Like, I couldn't see that coming. And you know, you get surprised by people's behaviors, but they can do a lot of damage just on that end. So that even if you do want to leave, now you're like, well, fuck. Everybody's turned against me, right? Or in some capacity. So I can imagine this can be really, really hard.
Yeah. And you're not going to like what I have to say.
Me or other people?
Anybody who's listening for it. You have 2 choices when it comes to dealing with a narcissist. Choice number 1, you leave. They aren't going to get better. They're not going to. Any change that they do make is going to be microscopic at best. Like, it's just not going to be anything that's substantial. They are never going to turn into the person who is patient and loving and kind. They aren't going to be that. So you have an option. Option number 1 is to leave. And in doing so, you are absolutely right. It is going to get ugly, and it's going to get ugly fast. It can be money, friends, family, like kids, like be prepared for war. Which is why I hope and pray that, you know, you don't marry a narcissist. Like, the people who are at least ending the relationship when they've been dating for a while, like, it is significantly better than a person who has to divorce this person, because again, they have no conscience, so not necessarily a conscience, but no real empathy for you. So there's nothing that's going to make them care about you more now that you're divorcing them or separating from them. And in fact, you're hurting them by doing that, and that's a damage to their ego. So now they're even more vengeful toward you. So be ready for the knockdown, drag out war. It's going to get ugly. And the other choice that you have, and this is the second choice, which is just, you have to learn to manage your expectations. There are people who can't leave, or who it's very difficult for them to leave, so they make up their mind to stay for whatever reason, financial, religious, political, like whatever the reasons are that they have said, I can't leave this relationship. Fine. You have to learn at this point to manage your expectations for this person and what they're going to give you out of that relationship. And what I mean by that is, you want to start cultivating other relationships in your life that will fulfill your needs. You have to rely on friends to do these things. Now, I'm not telling you to go out and cheat and get another lover. What I am saying is you need to develop relationships with people who are genuinely concerned about you, who care about you, who are willing to listen to your stressors. Like, genuine people who care about you, like, these are typically friends or other family members. So it's cultivating those other relationships to create basically a support network for the fact that, like, this person is never going to be there. And I would tell you, shift your expectations accordingly. Like, don't try and talk to them about meaningful, deep conversations. Like, ask them how dinner was. Like, did you enjoy this or not? Like, great, that's it. That's pretty superficial conversation. Did you like the movie or not? No? Okay. Like, take them for what they have to give you, which, whatever that is, their support, their money, their whatever, but cultivate the other relationships in your life. Because what I see, and one of the saddest things that I see as a therapist, and not just dealing with narcissistic personality disorder, but relationships in general, is people put 90% of their effort into their unhealthy, dysfunctional, inadequate relationships. And they leave about 10% left over for the people who are truly supportive and loving for them. And they do that most likely because they don't require, that relationship doesn't require the effort. But it's such a sad note to make, because it's like all of your time is being spent loving somebody or building something or trying to save something or repair something, and you've missed and lost the other relationships in your life that are actually valuable, the people that care about you. And so all of your effort goes into saving these things that are damaged or broken or in massive need of repair, and we neglect and we don't see or appreciate or value the other relationships that are there in your life that are truly loving and supportive. And so all I can tell you as a mental health professional, as a person who cares about other relationships, is shift that focus. Pay attention to where you're spending your time and what it's being spent on. And if you're consumed with this one person, you've neglected every other relationship in your life. And like, that should be a strong indicator, like, shit, something is wrong and I need help. We didn't even get into, some of the other, how it's developed within people, but I don't know if that's really relevant. But hopefully you guys found this informative, and you're able to take away something from it. And my heart goes out to the people who do struggle with this, who are in these types of relationships, because it is incredibly difficult to leave. It can be dangerous to leave, and it can be life altering for them to leave. And oftentimes I see the residual effects. Like, I'll see people kind of messaging or posting about a hurtful relationship, to me what it looks like is, I'm like, oh my God, this person's literally, their grieving process is happening online or in this group text or whatever it is. And there's this part of me that, sometimes I reach out to people, sometimes I don't. I'm like, they'll reach out to me or whatever, but I see it, and to me it's just like, there's the abuse that follows this type of relationship. So hopefully you guys find that, and I hope that you find the courage to reach out to people who care about you, who love you, who nurture you and support you, and build those relationships, cultivate those relationships, and find a way to make peace with this if you decide to stay. But otherwise, pack your shit, get ready for a war. All wars end. Remember that, and you'll get through this. Even if you have to suffer intense humiliation, do it. People who love you, they'll forgive you. They'll move on, and you will find happiness and hopefully a more complete relationship.
Yeah, I think that was great. And like I said, I know a lot of people who've been affected by this, so I'm sure there's a ton of people listening who have have either dealt with this and are still working through that, or are currently in the midst of it. And this hopefully brings to light some of the things to look for and how to navigate it. So as always, if you found value in the show, please share and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're interested in working with Rick, I will put his email below in the show notes. And then also for any other resources or questions you have for us, you can visit teamlocofit.com, and we will talk to you guys next week.